The big takeaway from the summit for me was that both leaders went into the meeting with pretty modest expectations. They weren't attempting to transform the US-Russian relationship. They weren't trying to achieve a reset of the relationship, as has happened so many times in the past, quite unsuccessfully. They were simply trying to arrest the deterioration in the relationship and reach a mutual understanding that both sides see it as in their interest to prevent spiraling into an unwanted confrontation. And they agreed that the best way to do this is to put in place a process for managing confrontation, regulating our competition between the two countries so that it doesn't get out of hand, to put some rules in place. And my big takeaway from this meeting was that they initiated a process for establishing those rules, for determining where the red lines are, what the do's and don'ts are that both sides agree to. And that's an important accomplishment. I don't underestimate the importance of achieving that relatively modest goal. The comparison between the Geneva meeting and the Helsinki meeting between Putin and Trump is enormous. The Helsinki meeting was, by all accounts, a disaster. Even Trump supporters came out with criticism of his performance there. His own aides said that they were cringing as they watched his press conference after the meeting. He clearly departed dramatically from whatever talking points had been prepared for him, said some things that I think are going to go down in history as examples of what not to do in these meetings and in the joint press conferences afterwards. And I don't think it was accidental that President Biden elected not to have a joint press conference with President Putin afterwards. I don't think he wanted to run any risk that there might be a similar kind of episode at the Geneva meeting. And frankly, I think it's a mark of the seriousness with which Biden approached this meeting. He wasn't looking to score debating points. He wasn't looking to create some sort of public relations victory over Russia. He went in with a very pragmatic, modest, realistic agenda, not driven by domestic politics in the United States. And that's a real contrast with the atmosphere that surrounded the Helsinki summit in 2018 and the way President Trump approached that meeting. Well, I don't expect cooperation. I think the cyber domain is simply too fraught with competition and even confrontation between the two sides for anyone to expect cooperation in that domain over the near term. I do expect dialogue about what the rules of the game should be in the cyber domain. And I think it's important to note that President Biden came to the meeting with a specific list of critical infrastructure the United States considers off limits for cyber intrusions. That's a very constructive step. I think it's far easier for the Russians to understand and comply with very specific red lines than it is for them to conform to ambiguous and very general so-called international norms of cyber behavior, which are, I think, subject to interpretation and ambiguity. However, I think there are a couple of problems in the dialogue. One is we may not both agree on what parts of critical infrastructure should be out of bounds. And these need to be mutually agreed, at least mutually understood red lines. And the Russians will have red lines of their own, I'm sure, that they're going to be presenting to us if they haven't done so already. We may not agree with some of that. Part of the problem with the cyber domain is it's very difficult to distinguish espionage, that is information gathering, from sabotage, from acts that are meant to disable, destroy, or cause dysfunction in a particular computer system. Because once you've successfully intruded into a system, you have the option not just of gathering data from within it, but disrupting or destroying its functions. And somebody on the receiving end of those intrusions can't tell necessarily what the ultimate intention of the intruder might be. And if we're going to start outlawing, for example, espionage, there are big implications to steps like that. I don't think, I'm not aware anyway, of an example in history where states have agreed that they're not going to spy on one another, or that certain aspects of their operation should be off limits to spying. So this is virgin territory for the US-Russian relationship, and I don't know how that's going to go. But I do think that we will be talking about it. I don't expect any kind of easy solution or early breakthrough there. It's going to be a difficult issue for us to come to terms with, but it's very positive that I think both sides have agreed that they have to talk about it. I'm slightly more optimistic today than I was a week ago about where the US-Russian relationship might be going over the near term. Both sides have agreed that they need to manage their competition. Both sides have agreed that they need to put in place some rules that will help prevent it from spiraling out of control. Both agreed in their joint communique that they have a responsibility to themselves and to the world not to get into a nuclear confrontation. Those are all positive things. Now, that doesn't mean that the wish will bring success. The mere desire to manage this competition and to prevent it from getting out of hand doesn't necessarily translate into an approach that succeeds in managing this competition. There are lots of things that could cause problems. The cyber domain is one of the biggest ones, in that there are a number of actors that are capable of doing very damaging things that could disrupt the relationship, who aren't under the control of either government. That's a wild card, and I don't know how that's going to play out. There are third countries and players in third countries in the Middle East, in Syria, in Ukraine, in Belarus, that could create facts on the ground that will be very difficult for either country to deal with without real damage to the US-Russian relationship. Trust between the two sides is extremely low. So we don't have a lot of ballast in the relationship that can keep the ship of bilateral relations afloat if stormy seas approach. And it's very easy to imagine those storms occurring in the US-Russian relationship. There's a lot that could rock that boat. So I'm more optimistic than I was. That doesn't mean I'm in general optimistic about where the relationship is going. We're still in dangerous waters.